Welcome to the Innovation Engineer podcast, where we talk about the hottest topic in tech. Today we have an awesome guest, Mark Jeffery. We actually met him on the social platform Polywork, and that's actually the best way to describe him, as he does way too many things. Up until last year, he worked as a mixture between developer and product manager, which I think is really awesome, and on his weekends as a paramedic. And if that's not enough, he also has a side hustle in making wooden globes. And as this is way too many jobs, he quit his work, started a podcast about quitting work, and also 2 other podcasts, and a really awesome project called the Open Web Mind. So in this episode, we talk with Mark about why you should combine the monkey with the computer, the Open Web Mind, and the Tangled Web, which in my opinion is a great way to describe actually the Web 3.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to the Innovation Engineer podcast, your favorite place for picking brains of your favorite engineers. So grab your nerdiest mugs, fill it with your beverage of choice, and enjoy. My name is Tarek.
And my name is Waschi.
And today we have a special guest with us, which is who is Mark. And I met him actually on Polywork, and I found him very, very interesting. And so I'm very, very happy that we have him on the Innovation Engineer podcast today, so that we can learn a little bit about the Tangled Web and the multiple podcasts that you're doing, and maybe even something about your wooden globe business. Mark, so maybe just introduce yourself and tell us who you are.
Yeah, Polywork is a good place for us to meet because, as you've sort of alluded to there, I do a whole bunch of things, and Polywork is sort of LinkedIn for people who don't just do one thing. LinkedIn seems to be set up for having a job and a resume, and so I really like Polywork for being able to kind of just support people like us who do multiple different things. So yeah, I guess my biggest 2 projects right now are the Open Web Mind, which I'm sure we'll get into, but is my more ambitious long-term project. And then this year I've been focusing more on podcasts. So my biggest podcast is actually The Last Theory, which is about a new theory of physics from Stephen Wolfram, who has come up with the computational theory of physics that I'm very interested in. You mentioned Tangled Web, which is my tech podcast, and also I have the Quit Work podcast, which is, it is what it says it is. It's a podcast about quitting work, where I talk to people who have quit their jobs and gone their own way. So yeah, there's a few other things that I'm doing at the moment. Sure, we'll get into more.
I love the name Tangled Web. So you can interpret so much stuff, and it has so much meaning, in my opinion. So I was reading Tangled Web, and then I was looking into your projects and Web3 and connection, interconnected semantic web. It makes sense. It's a perfect name for it. It's like, I really hope this name sticks, because it describes so many concepts actually in a very good way. And also checked the last theory and your last video, why you don't like the string theory. And I actually found it funny. It's a great video, actually. So awesome.
Oh, yeah, great. And I was wondering if there might be something like a connection. I was reading the Quit Your Work podcast. You started your wooden globe business. You have a history of IT. You were a developer, or still are a developer, right? And I think you moved to Canada, right? So is all of this connected somehow, or is it just coincidental?
I would like to say that my life is a little bit more connected than it is. Maybe I could join the dots kind of in retrospect, but it's a little bit random at times. Yeah, I'm as your listeners can probably tell by the accent, I'm originally from London, England. Moved to Canada 16 years ago, not for any work-related reason, just for a change of lifestyle. There's lots of space in Canada. It's very empty. There are mountains. There's snow. It's very lovely. The Globes was a side project while I was in full-time employment. Until last year, I had 2 jobs, one of which was full-time work in software development and product management, kind of a mix of those kind of different approaches to software. And I also worked as a paramedic. So that was my kind of nights and weekends job. And that was way too many jobs. And so right now I've quit both and focusing on my other project.
So very cool. if you ask me, and like your last job doing software engineering and product management also says it all, because I think both is connected. You cannot do product management and engineering like separated. It's one thing. You're building a product. You need both actually. So, and we talked about it multiple times on this podcast already, that we think this makes actually senior engineers, that they think more about the product because they are building a product, not just pure software. And again, it's all connected, right?
I listened to your conversation about that. Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think a lot of companies really try and separate those two roles, and they're usually different people. And that means that the software developers can't experiment and take on more product management type ways of thinking. And the product managers, unless they're also doing software development, tend to think, oh, yes, we'll do it this way, but without really understanding how software works. So I completely agree.
I think splitting up work makes sense. So maybe having like kind of head of product and head of like engineering, but actually in an ideal case, it's one person.
Maybe let's jump into the open web mind, because this is for me personally the most stunning thing, because first of all, I don't fully understand what the total vision of this is, but from the teasers that you wrote on your website and on the open web mind description, it sounds very intriguing. And my first impression was it's going into some kind of semantic web and semantic understanding of concepts and designs. But maybe you can walk us through what you're planning with the open web mind for next year, or then starting next year.
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it. The semantic web is certainly one aspect of it. And if I've not made it clear exactly what the project is, that's because it is, well, that's certainly all my fault for a start. And it's very early days, and I have a lot of ideas, and I'm slowly working them up. And I'm glad you used the word teasers there, because that's all I have up right now. I don't really have a comprehensive description of what this is going to be or where it's going to go. So I hope the teasers were enticing enough to get people interested. There's so many different directions to come at it. That's part of the problem, is that it's difficult to know, okay, what is this? And I describe it as a protocol for shared human intelligence, which is some nice words, but doesn't tell you exactly what it does. So I came at this from artificial intelligence. I was interested a long time ago in artificial intelligence. I kind of played around with it. This was back in the days before you could play around with artificial intelligence on the web. This was actually before the days of the web, so a very long time ago indeed. And there really wasn't much out there on artificial intelligence. I tried to find books and experimented myself, and there's not very much you can do on your own without being a brilliant mathematician, and I am not a brilliant mathematician, or indeed, if you listen to the string theory episode, I'm not a mathematician at all. So I was interested in the philosophical side of artificial intelligence, and I realized that was kind of sort of the limit of my interest. So eventually I wrote a book on the more philosophical side of AI called The Human Computer, again, a long time ago and long out of print now, I'm afraid. I felt I was more interested in human intelligence. I found I was more interested in the way we organize ideas ourselves, and rather than have someone else do the thinking for us, I was more interested in augmented intelligence, in kind of how computers that think, or not even think, but are set up in the same way as the human brain might help us to do our thinking. So be an aid to thinking rather than replace our thinking. Because honestly, I don't want to live in a world where AI replaces our thinking. I want to live in a world where we are thinking bigger because we have these tools and these computers to help us out thinking. So one of the things that is kind of very obvious when you look into AI is that you see knowledge graphs everywhere. I mean, that's a lot of the way that information is set up in an artificial intelligence. Obviously, there's all sorts of machine learning that goes into computer vision that is not based on ideas or knowledge. It's based on edges and aspects of pictures that then kind of form larger aspects of pictures. But eventually, if we're human, we want to work those up into ideas, into concepts that we then connect, much in the way that neurons are connected in the human brain. So I've been very interested by knowledge graphs for a long time. The idea of the open web mind is that this would be a knowledge graph, but it would be an open knowledge graph. So everybody could have their own mind, but they could connect. and you could navigate not only your own mind, but other people's minds, and they would be seamlessly integrated. So you'd have minds, for example, that would be based off of the information on Wikipedia, which is kind of a hive mind. It's not an individual person's mind. It's a very large number of people who have contributed to Wikipedia and created these wonderful web pages that are unfortunately in human language, like English or German or whatever the language is. And so a fantastic source for humans to kind of find knowledge, but you can't do much with it. You can read it, and then you have to think about it before you can do anything with it. What I'm interested in is turning that kind of knowledge into more of a knowledge graph so that it can be manipulated through APIs, so that people can use it, people can navigate it. You're not just reading a fixed bunch of text. You can say, oh, well, that's interesting. What if I manipulate it in this way? What if I follow this idea? How can I go through the whole knowledge graph, not just of myself, not just of Wikipedia, but of all of the people that I'm connected to in the open web mind?
Will this be in a structured way via an ontology, or how will this compatible? If it sounds like very general and all kinds of information flows in there, but how do you structure that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this is where protocol comes in. I'm just one person, and honestly, I don't want to start a $1 billion startup, which is what you would need to do to realize a project on this scale if you're going to actually do it yourself. So I don't want to do it myself. I want other people to do it. I want to work on a protocol that defines exactly what you say. Okay, what's the structure of this knowledge? And then, of course, I'll want to build on top of that myself because I won't be able to resist, but I hope that other people will want to build on top of it as well. So the basic structure will be a knowledge graph. A graph is a very simple idea. It's not the kind of XY graph that people think of mostly when we talk about graphs. I'm talking about the kind of graph where you have nodes and edges. So the nodes in a knowledge graph represent concepts, and the edges represent relationships between those concepts. So what I'm trying to do is define an extremely general protocol. As you say, it is extremely general, where any concepts can be represented by a node, and any relationship between the concepts can be represented by an edge between those nodes. And you can define relationships in terms of other nodes. So, if the relationship between two people, for example, is a friendship relationship, you can define that relationship between this person and that person in terms of a relationship that's defined by the concept of friendship, which in itself is simply another concept. And the advantage of keeping it extremely general like that is that, unlike Wikipedia, where you basically need a different Wikipedia for every language, you would have one concept of friendship, and you would have interpreters that would allow you to see that concept labeled as friendship in English, or whatever the word for friendship in German is, you'd see that in German. So it would not be confined to a single language. The knowledge graph itself would be beyond language, and people could use it in any language they liked.
Yeah. You compared it a little bit with Wikipedia, right? But Wikipedia is kind of curated by the crowd, and people were peer reviewing their articles. How could this work with something where I share my individual subjective knowledge in this graph? This will not be peer reviewed, right?
No, that's right. So it would be, your own personal graph would just be up to you. It would be, whatever information you wanted to feed in there, or whatever way you wanted to feed information in there, because you could have tools that feed information into your personal mind based on what you browse on the web, for example, or what you read, or documents that you open on your computer, or you could have tools that would feed that into your personal mind, but you have complete control over that personal mind. And only people who dare venture into Tarek's mind would want to hook up to your mind and share your knowledge. Wikipedia also is, it's actually pretty amazing, considering that it is sort of curated, but it's crowd curated, as you say, and so there's like stuff in there that's not true, and there's a lot of stuff that is true, and so you'd want to maybe follow the Wikipedia mind and get that information. And then you could have authorities. You could have, a newspaper, The Economist, for example. You might want to tap into The Economist's mind because they know all sorts of stuff that I don't know about world affairs and about economics and all sorts of things. That if I could tap into their mind and follow their ideas, that would be interesting to me. So you could curate your own collection of minds that you are interested in, following the knowledge in those minds. So you might choose your friends, you might choose people you admire, you might choose authorities like The Economist and Wikipedia and so on.
Yeah. And do you consider yourself to be like a follower of the Web3 movement where we try to decentralize everything? Is this something where you see your idea be located?
Yeah, that's another great question. So I can see uses of Web3 in the open web mind, but I don't think it's actually essential to the open web mind. We're kind of at a stage of Web3 where sort of everything is Web3, whether it's needs Web3 or not. It's kind of, the people these days who want a database use a blockchain. It's like, a blockchain is a really, really slow database. I mean, it's got some real advantages in terms of security and so on. But if all you want is a database, just use a database. Don't use a blockchain. So for a lot of this, I really in favor of going the protocol route rather than a Web3 route, because a protocol is completely decentralized, like RSS, the protocol for podcasts that people use to publish podcasts. You can publish other things on it, but it's it's used for most podcasts these days to put podcasts out there. It's not Web3, and yet it is decentralized. I can put up an RSS feed on my website, and that's completely decentralized. I didn't have to ask anybody's permission to do that, and yet it doesn't require all of the overhead of Web3 or all of the expense and energy usage and strange legal considerations that you have to think about when you start anything in the Web3. So yeah, I'm more in favor of going with a protocol for the core of the open web mind. Things like how do you access all of these different minds? Who owns what mind? There might be a role for Web3 there, because that's a very Web3 use case. It's ownership. It's like, I want to be able to prove that this is my mind and nobody can take it away from me. So yeah, there may be use cases there where a blockchain would come in.
Yeah, especially because my intuitive reaction was, where do I store my stuff? Somewhere on the AWS cloud, but then again, AWS would be the owner kind of indirectly of my stuff, right? Then maybe it would be better to have this through IPFS distributed or something like that.
AWS would not be the owner, right? So because obviously you run servers all the time, but what reminds me of is actually Mastodon, this like Twitter clone, because it's also not Web3, but it's decentralized. So you can just start an account there. You can subscribe to other people, and then you go that much deep into it that you can even run your own Mastodon node if you like, right? Because it's open, and that's also the idea, without being Web3 actually.
I really like the WordPress model here, where WordPress is open source. So, your question, where do I host my mind? It's like, well, wherever you like. It's a protocol. You can write your own software to do it. You can use somebody else's software to do it. WordPress is kind of similar there, in that anybody can use WordPress software to set up a WordPress instance on their own server if they really want to. It's open source. They can do that. It's probably a lot of work, and most people just go to WordPress.com and pay WordPress for them to set up a website, a WordPress instance for them. And so, yeah, I sort of imagine it working like that. By being open, anybody can do whatever they like to it, but then there's going to be, obviously organizations that will do what WordPress has done and make it way more convenient just to spin up an instance of a mind.
Yeah.
I personally love also the idea of augmented intelligence, because you know what? The only way is to beat a chess computer, actually.
Yes, I do. Yes. You combine the monkey and the computer.
Yes.
And the monkey brain is good for something.
Yeah, I love this idea, actually. And I think a lot of people who are afraid of artificial intelligence, of robots, or whatsoever, they actually miss a point. It's like with a medical doctor, right? You cannot replace him with analytic software or whatsoever. but like you can make his diagnosis way better. And obviously also when you do surgery, you're already using like surgery robots, right? Where you sit in front of a computer, you only have like this, this input devices, which are kind of schizo-like things. I don't know what they're called actually. And then you do surgery through a kind of a robot, and it's augmented, it's supported. And I think there will be in the future even more AI in there. For example, for the camera, the camera will autofocus and stuff. And will be like in multiple places that the AI is just like helping you. It's not replacing you.
I actually did not understand the monkey reference. Was that a metaphor or was that an actual thing with the chess game? What's that? I don't know that.
We're a little bit more advanced than monkeys, but I was using the word monkey to refer to us as humans. They don't actually use monkeys, but a human and a computer together is actually able to beat a chess computer, as far as I understand.
Yes. That's also from the awesome book. There's a German book actually from a German author. It's called Quality Land. It's also translated in English, and it's like a science fiction novel. It's a kind of comedy, but it's also about artificial intelligence, and so they're also making all this kind of jokes about AI and robots and stuff and so on.
Tarek, I completely agree about the artificial intelligence. I don't know why nobody thinks this way. Like, the doctor example that you used, Waschi, was perfect. It's like everybody wants either to be a doctor in the office just making all their own decisions, or an AI that does it all for you based on your symptoms, which sort of is never, or maybe it will work one day, but it's not going to work right now. Why the doctor wouldn't want the symptoms entered into the computer to suddenly come up with, the AI thinks there's like a 60% probability of this diagnosis, a 30% probability of this diagnosis. The doctor would be able to look at the screen and say, oh, I forgot about that 2%, which is only if you've been to a tropical region recently. Have you been to a tropical region recently? Like, why, yes, I have. I went to Costa Rica last week. And that could really improve doctors' services.
Or if you do a skin check, for example, right? The doctor's examining you just with his like eyesight, right? So normally I would say, just take a camera and then let some spots be marked and then look directly at those spots, right? That would be way more efficient and faster and secure for everyone.
Yeah, I think people are scared because of science fiction, and when we see AI in science fiction, it's always like a human-like robot conquering the world. But what AI is actually developed for is as a specialized tool for specific use cases. And so the computer doing my skin checkup and do some probabilistic predictions for what my skin health is, this thing will not conquer the world and kill humanity, right? It's a tool. It's a very specialized tool. This is the reality of AI.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that term AI. I mean, AI used to mean that, like a robot that could think for itself, whereas what we have now is actually machine learning, which is amazing. Yeah. It's an incredible tool. And yet we call it AI, and people get confused. AI, well, that's the sentient robots that come to kill us all.
Right.
It's just very confusing term.
That's a joke I always make with Tarek, and he never agrees with me. What's the difference in AI and machine learning? If it's written on PowerPoint, that's AI. If it's done in code, it's machine learning.
I like that joke.
Yeah, me too. Tarek doesn't. He doesn't agree, actually. So what I'm also interested in, you do so many like YouTube stuff, newsletters and podcasts, so many at the same time. But actually, most other like publications say, okay, focus on one thing. So you're not focusing. That's also why you're maybe on Polywork, because you do so many things. But is it out of interest, or because normally if you like put all your energy into one thing, it's more likely to succeed, right?
Yeah, that's right. As long as you know what that one thing is. I mean, if you don't have much time, like if you have a full-time job and you're doing side projects, then doing it serially is probably a good idea. You try one thing, you realize it doesn't work. Okay, try another thing. If you had too many things and you were trying to do a full-time job at the same time, then that's really not going to work. Whereas I have the luxury right now that I don't have a full-time job. And by trying many things in parallel, I think it really takes the pressure off. It really gets rid of that problem that some founders get when they first start out, is they try one thing, it fails, they try another thing, it fails, and they think, I'm just no good at this. And it may be true that you're just no good at it, or it may be that just the first couple of ideas just weren't the right ideas. It's really hard to know what the right ideas are when you start. And so I sort of did the same. So my 3 podcasts, for example, I wouldn't have been able to tell you ahead of time which one was going to take off the most. It's just really hard to predict. And in retrospect, I can predict it. I can say, okay, well, the reason that this one took off and the other ones didn't is because of this, this, and this. But when you're looking ahead rather than backwards, it's really difficult to know that. So I don't know. There are advantages and disadvantages of both, I think, both the many small bet strategy and the laser sharp focus. I think certainly a lot of the advice that founders get is from people who have taken VC, venture capital, and are starting a company that they want to be $1 billion company. If you're doing that, do the laser focus thing, because when you're getting millions of dollars in from venture capitalists, you absolutely need to be laser focused. But I have the luxury that I'm not taking any money. I'm doing this on my own time. I have enough time to do multiple projects. So sure, yeah, it's interest, but it's also, let's see what actually works here.
But your projects, your podcast probably grew over time, right? You did not have the initial thought like I want to have 3 or 4 or 5 podcasts, right?
I actually started them all at the same time.
Really?
I started them at the beginning of this year, and I made it as my New Year's resolution. I'm going to put out 100 podcast episodes this year. So I actually launched them all 3 at the same time, which has some advantages that I could learn how to use the podcast hosting software and that kind of stuff all in one go and just churn them out. But no, it didn't actually grow over time. This was just my crazy project for this year.
Yeah. Nice.
I always need to hold back. Actually, I'm always says, okay, I could do a podcast about this, I could do this, and I could this. And I'm like, no, focus on one thing. So just release the next episode, work on this one, because I'm working a full-time job, right? So this is just a hobby, right? So then if I would now like say start a second podcast, for example, talking about tech gadgets, as an example, I would not have time for this podcast. That would be also bad, because I love talking about IT stuff.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it? It's hard. I mean, the kind of people who start podcasts are the kind of people who have lots and lots of ideas. It's hard not to start them. It's almost like you have to kind of put them on hold until you really, really just can't resist starting it. It's got to be that strong. And it's also hard to drop them. I mean, that was sort of my idea this year was I'll start 3 podcasts. I don't know what's going to work. I don't know which of them I'm going to enjoy. And, maybe come the end of the year, I'll drop 1 or 2 of them. And that's really hard because there's the old sunk cost problem where you put all this work in, you've got a little bit of an audience, and you have to decide to say bye-bye to all of that. So, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, with this in mind, this is actually my motivation to not start the one or the other project, because I know with a 90% probability I have to kill this at the end of the year. So maybe don't even start yet, because I already know I won't have enough resources until the end to actually pull this through.
You're very disciplined. That's good.
Yeah, but I think for me, it's a little bit like Waschi. I have so many ideas and so many things that I want to start, but I know exactly I won't be able to maintain everything at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We touched also Web3 a little bit. So, and you didn't really voice your opinion on it, actually. So do you think Web3 will be a thing, or do you think it's more like a hype and everything is Web3, it's just like marketing term?
Yes, is the answer. Both of those. Web3 will be a thing, and there's an awful lot of hype around at the moment. And it's sort of like the web in 1999. It's like there was so much hype, and everything was hyperinflated, and there was obviously going to be a .com crash because none of these businesses were viable. And yet the web was a thing, and the companies that came through that .com crash turned out to be absolutely absurdly successful companies on the web. So I think it's the same with Web3. I think any individual project you're looking at right now might well be doomed to be gone in a few years' time. But Web3 itself, yes, I think is a thing.
Yeah, because for your knowledge graph, for example, if you have multiple people, there's also the question of trust, right? So an issue we have right now on the internet. And if you say, okay, I'm using, for example, blockchain to give out trust. And then I say, okay, I trust this node, for example, or this mind, actually. And then people trust other people and they say, okay, he trusts this one, so it increases my trust score, actually. That's a concept we had in the past, for example. That could be also a solution, like decentralized trust scores calculated individually for yourself.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is one of the advantages of making it a protocol where, you don't have, if you want to tweet, you have to go to twitter.com. That's the place where you go to tweet. And it's a whole bundle of services, including a particular algorithm that surfaces particular tweets for you, particular ways of checking other people's reputation with blue check marks or whatever else Twitter's going to go to. It's a whole bundle of stuff, but with an open protocol, you could have, Waschi's way of creating trust between people. When you're trying to search for somebody to follow about tech, for example, you could go to Waschi's algorithm or Web3 based trust system, whatever, or you could go to somebody else's. And so I think this is one of the possible futures for Twitter. I doubt they'll do it because they're a commercial company, and once you have investors, then the investors want their money back. And that's one of the advantages of starting with an open protocol, is that you don't have investors who want you to make as much money as you possibly can, regardless of whether that's good for the ecosystem as a whole. It allows you to have this kind of structure where anybody can set up a trust system, whether Web3 or Web2 or whatever way they like, and anybody can set up their own mind. And I like that way of doing things.
That's similar to Mastodon, right? It's like a platform where it's more like open source. Without the trust system, that's still missing because they are like hyper liberate and like everyone can voice whatever they want, which I think is also a danger of Web3. It didn't go well with this. Yeah. I think it's undemocratic. It's more like anarchy, what we have now with the web, because anybody could put anything on the web. And that's for me not a democratic movement, because there is no like governance of the community, actually, because it's more like everybody can do everything. Danger I see with Web3 that it happens again.
Yeah, it's a great example, though. I mean, anybody can put a website up right now, for example, and most of those websites are going to be bad, and some of them are going to be horrible and not a place you would ever want to visit. But even though you can get to those websites, generally what you do is you go to Google and say, I want a website about this. And Google has done the work and worked out, okay, which are the actual authoritative websites, which are the websites we don't want to show because the safe search filter is on. And so Google has set itself up kind of on top of the web. And it's a shame that it's so large and there's very little competition for Google. But you can imagine having many different guides to what minds are out there and which you might want to follow.
Yes. That would also be like, for example, if you go to LinkedIn or Twitter, you have one timeline. And if they change the algorithm, you can't do anything about it. And if you have an open protocol, for example, you can say, okay, I can plug in 5 different algorithms. For example, I want it just sorted by date. I want it by relevance. I want it by what my friends actually liked or whatever they did on this platform.
Yeah, I want to see that. That's I want to see that on Twitter, and I want to see that all over the web. It's just, I don't know. I think this is the future. There's the web has gone through kind of a couple of phases. It started off with this dream of decentralization, that anybody can publish anything, and then we realized, that doesn't really work. Being quite so anarchical, you do need authorities. You do need things like Google to give you a guide to the web so that you can find the good stuff and not run across the horrible stuff. So suddenly the web for like the last 20 years has become highly centralized. Social media is highly centralized. But you see with Web3 and other decentralization ways of doing that it's sort of like the tide is turning. And I'm hoping that the tide will turn. And because it's so much cheaper to write software and put out software now than it was even a few years ago. The structure is out there that you don't need $20 million of venture capital to set up a new software product. You can actually do it extremely easily these days. So I'm hoping that'll tip the balance back to decentralization.
Yes, so I remember the good old days when everything was decentralized. I had a read list of 20 blogs I was following. And each day I was just opening them and seeing, oh, this is something new and so on. Later with RSS feeds, okay, I had an RSS reader. But then because it was like a movement to centralization, everything moved to medium.com. And, they are like totally shitty platform. They are the worst of the worst of the worst, actually. So I hate it. So first I thought, it's cool. It's one platform for all the blogs. But again, capitalism, right? So it broke this awesome blog community, ecosphere, whatever it is, actually. And now there is no good solution out there right now.
It's fascinating, isn't it? I learned this lesson very early in the days of the internet when I got my first email address. You could sign up for a free email address back then, just as you can now. So I went to this company that was offering free email addresses. Okay, now I've got my email address. And then they, a little bit later, they sent me an email saying, oh, we're now going to charge you for it. It's no longer free. You're going to have to pay this every month. Okay, and it's really hard to change your email address. You have to email everybody that you've ever emailed, say, could you update my email address, please? And I learned my lesson. I'm never doing that again. So the next email address I set up, I didn't pay them anything because that seemed like extortion to me. But what I did is I got my own domain name and I set up an email address at that domain name. And I own that domain name. And so nobody can take that away from me or suddenly say that you're going to have to pay $20 a month for it. So, yeah, I saw that with Medium as well. I was wondering, why are people really suddenly flocking to this platform? All it is the same stuff that we've all been doing, this blogging thing, except now you don't own your stuff and you don't have any control over how it's used. And I sort of see this with podcasting as well. Podcasting has been free and open for a long time. And now people are going to Spotify and publishing their podcast on Spotify. It's like, you sort of don't own it. You don't own it. If you give it to a company, make sure. I do the same. I mean, I publish my videos as you do on YouTube, and you sort of don't own that. You don't own your audience on YouTube. So it's good to be aware of this. It's like, how much do I actually own what I'm putting out there?
Yeah, but I think this is a very important step in the evolution of the web. At some point of time, centralizing services was simply the practical thing and the thing that enabled us to grow as a web society. And there was this time where Facebook became a thing. Everybody had a Facebook account. It was really convenient to simply communicate and share posts and everything through Facebook, because as you said, you lose your email address for some reason and you lose the contact to this person. But having this centralized identity on Facebook means you never lose the connection to this person. At a certain point of time, people were really saying, what, you have an email address? You're just an old person. Email is for old people. Everyone is on Facebook. Today, it's like, oh, you have a Facebook account. You're such an old person. Only the old millennials have Facebook accounts. It's so old school, right?
Yeah.
So of course, we are going through this evolution. But at some point in time, this was a very important step for us to develop all these skills and these services. And now the next step of evolution, I also see this, and now that we have the infrastructure and now that we have this knowledge and the skills, we can break free from the centralized infrastructure and regaining this control over data and protocols. And so I also think that Web3 in some form, however it is going to look like, will be a thing. And everyone is laughing when we say, metaverse has nothing to do with Web3. But a lot of these concepts that they are counting on are inherited from this decentralization. And I have these virtual assets. And of course, I want to use them in different virtual worlds. Otherwise, it wouldn't be as powerful as Mark Zuckerberg is describing it. Yeah, and even though a lot of things that are happening there right now are hype, but I think they have the right sense of what is going to come, and so it's very valuable to jump onto this train and be part of the Web3 movement, even though VR is not necessarily the same thing as we do with blockchains and decentralization. Yeah, but everything is going to be connected.
Do you think Meta's going to keep it open to Web3? Because that's not Facebook's DNA, is it?
I don't think that even Facebook knows exactly what they are going to do. I mean, even right now, they are going through very hard times. And so I think there will be a lot of shifting in their strategy. But the initial idea of the metaverse, I think it was tightly coupled to this decentralization philosophy.
Yeah. I've never really got into AR or VR, but I'm very interested in it. And about a year back, I was going to buy a VR headset, and then Facebook acquired Oculus, and you couldn't even use it without getting a Facebook account. And I can't even get a Facebook account. Whenever I try, they think I'm not a human. I send them my passport and everything, but they refuse to accept that I'm a human being. So I can't even get a Facebook account. So I'm sort of locked out of the metaverse. It's a very strange place to be, but it's informative. It's like, okay, I know this company, Facebook. I've dealt with them before. I don't want the metaverse to be run by them. I want it to be open. I want it to be a place where I can actually join without being told that I'm not a human, and I can actually share my stuff and still own it rather than have Meta own it.
Yeah. For everyone who's listening right now, check out the Tangled Web podcast. There is an episode about Mark's journey trying to create a Facebook account. It's really, really entertaining. I listened to this. It's a really great story, and it sounds absolutely unbelievable.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
But that's also the reason why I think the metaverse is a pure marketing term, right? But what they actually want to do is standardize protocols again, like HTTP was standardized, so that's why they have like a committee working on this kind of stuff. And I think Web3 is a better term, but it still sucks. Web3 sounds like it's the next version of the web, just an upgrade. And so I think some things like Tangled Web would be a way better word to describe what we actually need, like new protocols and stuff, right?
Yeah, I like that. Let's rename Web3 Tangled Web.
Yes. So many people say, yeah, Web3. I think we could even be at Web 9 already, because nearly everybody claims, yeah, we're building Web3, Industry 4, Industry 5, Web 4.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though, to be honest, when I was writing my diploma thesis, the term Web3 was actually already used. Back then, we had Web 2, of course, but everybody was already preparing for Web 3. And back then, Web 3 was the semantic web, actually having something like the collection of knowledge and what we today know as knowledge graphs. But back then, we called this one the Web 3. And I don't know, this name never stuck.
Interesting. Yeah, that kind of failed, didn't it? Those early attempts at semantic web. Sorry, go on, Waschi.
I have a book called Web 3.0. I bought it when I was studying and wrote some stuff. And it was about semantic web and like accessibility and so on. That was in around 2005, actually. No, 2008. Yeah, exactly. More like 2008 around.
Roundabout, yes.
Yeah, it's strange how that, I don't know, I think it was just the wrong approach. A lot of that work on the semantic web required people to add tags to their websites, meta tags. And it's like, well, I don't know, if you require people to do stuff, it's probably not going to happen. I mean, these days you don't need that. You can get machine learning to read a website, and you don't actually need any of those tags to tell you what the website is about.
So I think we can also wrap it up, because otherwise we may run out of time.
Right. Yes. But it's super entertaining, and I could just go on and go on. That is usually Waschi and my problem, that we don't dare to wrap up the episode. Yeah, but it was super entertaining. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us, and I'm really looking forward to what is going to happen with the Open WebMind. I already subscribed to the newsletter, and of course I will follow you on at least the Tangled Web podcast. As I said, it was very, very entertaining.
Yeah, this is such a fun conversation. I've really enjoyed the conversations you two have together, and it was great to be a part of it. And if there's more that you want to talk about, let's do it again sometime.
Sure, there's so many topics we could talk about. I mean, it's everything what is about like connection Web3, and even like you have also like a podcast about leaving your career. And I think this is also an awesome thing to talk about, because Tarek, actually, he's a normal full-time employee, and he's afraid of leaving his job. And I'm a freelancer, so I quit my job kind of 2 years ago, and I'm just now like running from project to project and loving this lifestyle. Even if it's very similar to my old way of working, it feels totally different.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I love this. I love future of work conversations and the new ways that we're doing things. So yeah, let's talk about that sometime.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, yeah. Then for everyone sitting in Europe, have a wonderful night. Everyone who's sitting in North America, have a beautiful day. And talk to you the next time.
See you next week at the same time, at the same spot. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Goodbye.